Well, hi, everybody. Welcome back for a very special episode of the Awake and Wait podcast, in which I'm interviewing a man I'm going to have the pleasure of sharing a conference with, Freddy Silva. If you haven't heard about him until now, you're going to want to run out and buy at least one of his many books. He's an expert in not only crop circles, but portals. We're going to dive into what portals are and why I was so excited to have him on the show because he answered a big mystery for me. And I said, I just have to ask him in person. So before I talk too much more, welcome to the show, Freddy.
Hello, Suzanne.
Yeah. We're going to be together at the Expand conference in Atlanta, June 7th and 8th, because both of us, yeah, isn't that right? June 7th and 8th?
I hope so.
Yeah, I hope so too. Both of us have a book in a series of books called the Common Sentience series. I have mine's hard copy. That's my mediumship book, but yours is on my Kindle. So there we go.
I'm glad you've got it. I haven't got it handy.
Yeah.
I spent years in advertising. I'm terrible at self-promoting. Isn't that the irony?
That is pretty bad.
Where's your book? I don't know, somewhere.
Somewhere around here. Well, as we were just saying, I could go down a list of questions, but it's much more fun to chat. And
Okay.
I would like to start with how you got into metaphysics.
Oh, it was very simple. I was drawing pyramids when I was 3 and didn't get along with any of my peers. And then you get seduced into the real world, and you go into thinking that you got to have a high-paying job and do all the things that young people do, and the reckless things that young people do. And you chase girls or boys, and you get a house and a car and all of that, and you get seduced into all of that. But you're very uncomfortable with this person that you are. And one day, when I was taken out of commission when I was working in Chicago, of all places, because I had the tenacity to say that we can't sell things that have artificial sweetness in them because it's killing people, and we have scientific evidence. So I'm at home looking at my looking at my navel, and my wife at the time complaining that I should go and get a job, and I'm reading all the books on my shelf on pyramids and fairies and other interesting things, and I'm thinking, I want to do this. This is where my heart is. And but the thing is, the leap of faith is huge. I mean, you're going to go from paycheck to living on air. But I did it. About 1999, I sort of decided that I was going to make a big break and study crop circles, which is the most incredible phenomenon in our era. And the book becomes an international bestseller right off the bat. So it gives me permission then to trust the process that someone's looking after me somewhere. I call it the management. And the more I go into have personal experiences with sacred space, not just crop circles, because they are essentially sacred space in just using flattened crop, I found myself having personal experiences in these places and realizing that there's a different world out there, and it interacts with ours at these spots. And I figured if it's happening to me, then I can record this and tell other people that it can happen to them. And one thing just leads to another. It's a process of trust, of just taking a big leap of faith, losing your friends, your marriage, your house, everything. But, there are only slight problems along the way. You gain other things along the way called the fringe benefits, as I call it. And I wouldn't change the experience for anything else. And then, 9 books and 15 documentaries later, here I am. I haven't really stopped working. And it was very much a way of finding out how I can bridge the gap between metaphysics and the real world. That's the thing that most people have a problem with. And that's what I was particularly good at in my job when I was a creative director, was to look at a common language that brings the distance between people, or I should say the client that's trying to sell you a product, to the public that's trying to buy it. That's where the technique really comes in. And that's what I was particularly good at. So I'm just applying something that I learned in the commercial world to tell people that there's something that is accessible, and it certainly has enormous benefits for everybody. And if you doubt that today, Just look around you at the political situation around the world. We can't maintain a government in cohesion for more than 5 years. If you're in a country that does, you're very lucky.
Mhm.
But back in the day, thousands of years ago, they can maintain systems of organization going on for thousands of years without any war and mutual benefit. And they were using these processes that we learn in sacred sites. So I figured that's something that would be very applicable today. And that's why I followed this passion and still am.
I love that term sacred science, and I don't hear it too often. How would you define that?
Oh, it's very measurable now. That's the funny thing. It's taken us thousands of years to design the right protocol and the right gizmos to actually detect the subtle forces that are available in these ancient places. Great Pyramid is one perfect example. Stonehenge is another. In fact, I'm just writing about it right now. And that we now have the technique to measure these subtle things that we call the tingly-wingly in the metaphysical world. And the science call it absolute nonsense. Well, they call it telluric current. There has a word for it. And now NASA is able to actually measure these telluric currents that flow through the landscape just like serpents. And that's why they used to be called the serpent lines or the dragon paths or the pathways of the fairy folk and so forth. So now we have the means to measure subtle energy at sacred sites. And Stonehenge is a great example because they actually buried thousands of little modules around the site, and Avebury, the world's biggest stone circle, just up the road. And they found that the site behaves like an organism, like a living organism. It goes to sleep at night. You can measure the frequency just dying down, like a person that's been working all day long. And then just before dawn, all the electromagnetic current of the local surrounding land is attracted to these henge monuments, and it goes around the ditch. It starts going around like a big spindle. This is why so many of the sites associated with their building talks about this, the fairies putting up the megaliths while they're holding their spindles. It's the folklore is actually telling you what it does. So at dawn, when the sun just creeps over the horizon, a big doorway opens in these major megalithic sites, and the current goes from the ditch through this doorway into the center of the site at twice the frequency of the local land. And there's not one scientist on the planet that can explain how a bunch of stones erected in a certain geometric way can do that forever and ever and ever. And these are the places that became known as great spiritual centers or centers of spiritual doctrine, or places that would help the local population grow agriculturally and spiritually because they are alive. So now we can measure this stuff. We can know that the sites really are alive. We can find out how long the stones actually can store energy and how long it takes for them to release. It's still a very, shall I say, a science in its infancy because not many people give it credence, but the people that do are astonished by the fact that A, they were skeptical of the actual stories, and two, they became absolutely stupefied by the fact that these stones are living, breathing organisms, exactly as they said in the old days. So that's why it needs to be elevated to the point of science, because there's a natural science at work. And the people that put these places there, if you read the folklore around the world, they're described as the gods. Now, a god is nothing more than the spirit of anything in nature. Water has a god, a lamp has a god, paint might have a god. So as long as you understand the rules behind water, you become the god of water. So anybody can do that. And what they said was that these gods had complete control over the laws of nature. They could harness nature, and then they could manipulate it in a certain way to elevate consciousness, elevate your connection to another level of reality. And that's why the places that we know and love today so well have still places where people go to on pilgrimage because they still work.
It's very interesting to me to hear a grown man talk about it.
I'd use grown in a very slight manner.
Yeah. To hear you talk about fairies. I recall being at a place where there was a book about fairies, and I said, "Oh, I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole." I mean, former Navy officer, I want people to believe mediumship is real. I'm not going to start talking about fairies. But my guides, who I by then believed in, said, "Go get the book." And I had a wonderful experience and put them to the test. And my belief system has shifted a bit, but I don't focus on that. What are fairies?
It actually, the root of fairies has a root in a historical event, and it's based on the fair people or the fair folk. And it was a group of gods that originally came from the region of the Armenian highlands before they moved to Sumeria. They became known as the Anunaga or the Anunnaki, the people of the sky god. And eventually they moved to today Ukraine and Bulgaria, around the Black Sea. They were called the Tuwa the Danube. And they were supposed to be the remains of an old bloodline of spiritual tradition and spiritual keepers, people who had special abilities way and beyond what normal humans can do. And they were compared to gods. And eventually they moved across Europe to Carnac in Brittany. They went across to Wales, Ireland, and Scotland. They became known as the Tuatha De Danann, which are actually a historically validatable people. And they were described as fair-skinned, much like in the local population, with blonde hair, blue eyes, or sometimes red hair and green eyes. And they talk about these people in the Pacific as well, and they are compared to the gods. And it wasn't a matter of supremacy, by the way. There's no record I found of any kind of racial supremacy about this, which is where we get into trouble, in terms of polite conversation. They said that there was no superiority between our interaction with these fair folk and the ordinary human beings who were hunter-gatherers at the time. There was a mutual respect between people, and that's why we revere them. We didn't sort of sit there and bow down to them. There was a reverence because they taught us so much. And I like that. And by the time they get into Ireland as a fair folk, when the church arrives and says, well, we can't have that because we want to take over the religious discipline of Western Europe. But these people don't want anything to do with that. They are still honoring this old bloodline that by the time they got to Ireland was already on its knees. They pretty much intermarried and behaved like normal human beings. And so they began to demystify the fair people by calling them fairies. One, because it miniaturizes them. So if you're miniaturized, you don't really pay much attention to them. They are not equal to human beings. And the other thing is, because they were trying to turn people away from the sacred places associated with the fair people who built them, they also decided to make them invisible. They only live in the mounds. They're not real. They're a part of your imagination. And if you happen to be afflicted with fairies, that's a sign of the devil playing with you. So you have to go to church and atone. So you see that there's a political motivation and a machination behind the whole thing. But that's essentially where fairy comes from. It's based on the fair folk who had these incredible abilities. And yet, paradoxically, after the race died or inbred or bred into the human race, which is why there's so many red-haired people in that part of the world, in Western Europe, and the Pacific as well, by the way. And they said that the essence of the spirit of these people still lives in the mounds and the megalithic sites, because the sites, like I said before, they're alive. They remember everything. There are portals into another level of reality. So when you go to these places and you encounter these fairies, and they're very real, by the way. I'm talking from experience here, and I got the funniest stories to go with this stuff. You are actually interacting with beings that once were in physical form, but now are in non-physical form. So they're very real on their level of reality as we are in ours, but that's not how they appear in real life. When we see a fairy in Ireland, it's a way that they manifest themselves in a way that's acceptable to us, that doesn't make us go screaming off and running off, because they can take on very weird shapes. But because we don't have any experience of this, we become afraid. So if you were to say this in Persia, they would say, oh yeah, they call them the jinn, and they appear in a completely different shape. In Egypt, they also appear in a very different shape. So the spirit world appears in a way that's acceptable to the local folklore and the local population. And I remember being when I was learning all this stuff, my fearless teacher is an incredible psychic. She helps the police with their inquiries. We were in a mound which had been turned into not a funeral place. Sometimes as a writer, you forget the most basic words, as a graveyard by the church. And we were there just to tune into the spirit of place and get to learn and differentiate different forms of energy, especially this Kana energy. And I thought, I don't know why we're here, but I guess we're here to help the dead go back to where they came from. They may be stuck here. She doesn't tell us this stuff. And at the end of clearing the energy of this beautiful mound, I feel someone holding on to my finger. My arms are down beside me, and I lift this up, and there's a little creature stuck to my hand, It's about this big, with like an onion head. I call it onion head as a term of endearment, with a big protruding belly and spindly little legs and spindly little arms. And I picked him up. I said, "What the hell are you?" And he starts complaining. It's like he starts gibbering at me, and I said, "Okay." I just put it right down. I went, "He's got a bit of an ego, hasn't he?" And my fearless, glorious leader is laughing at the whole thing, and the rest of the group is saying, "What are you looking at?" I said, "Can't you see this guy? I mean, he's a lovely little fella." And he kept holding on to my finger. He wouldn't let go. And eventually, he was like just the spirit of place. He just wanted to find out what we were doing, and he felt comfortable with us. And then eventually, as I was walking to the perimeter of the energy field of the mount, I just suddenly felt him let go. And he, boom, just disappeared because he can't go past the portal, you see. There literally is an edge of energy around these ancient places where beyond which they can't go. That's their little world where they live in. So you still can interact with these places. So if you're afflicted with the fair folk, the fairy people, or the goblins and all of that, it's real. I mean, they really are very real, and they manifest in a way, present themselves in a way that is acceptable and pleasing to you. So don't go running off, and watch out for their sense of humor, because they have a vicious sense of humor.
And what purpose do they serve? Are they just staying there because they built the place and they like it?
That's one of them. They're protective spirits of the place. Sometimes they're there to dispense information. If you go there with the intention matches the actual spirit of place, and an interaction of information takes place. So, for example, you feel like you want to go to, let's say, Egypt, because you want to get certain information, but suddenly during the booking process, you suddenly feel compelled to book a flight to Scotland. And you go, "That was weird. I had no intention of going to Scotland." And then you go to Scotland, you go to some of these stone circles up in the islands, and you get the information that you're looking for, because Egypt didn't have that. Because your intention goes through time and space. It connects to all the temples on the planet, and all of them are going, "Oh, well, Suzanne is wanting some information. Oh, I don't have that. I have something else. We need to send it to another place up in Scotland." And boom, before you realize it, they've manipulated the facts so that you end up in the very place that you're searching for. So it's very important to maintain that equilibrium of intention, because it sends a little packet of information through time and space to its desired location. So always trust that gut feeling, because it always works. And again, talking from experience.
Well, the reason I asked about fairies, and I had no intention to, because even just talking about it still makes me a little uncomfortable, is I lived in a home in Florida once that looked out on the most gorgeous old growth oak trees. And it had the most magical feeling. It was so peaceful. I was sitting outside by myself one day looking at these trees, and I sensed what I can only call fairies up in the ferns looking at me, kind of giggling. And I thought, all right, I'm going to trust that you're real. If you are real, well, the book had said that dragonflies are associated with fairies. So send me some dragonflies. Freddy, I got bombarded, swarmed. I had never seen dragonflies in that home. And suddenly, there were at least 100 swarming around me. So
be careful what you ask for. They'll give it to you. It is
exactly.
magical. It really
Yeah.
is. And sometimes it's worth going to the place and not ask anything. Go there and give something. In Native America, obviously we're here in North America, you go take some tobacco, take some sage. When I go to New Mexico to the sacred sites there, I always take a little tobacco, a little bit of honoring. And afterwards, I just say, I give a little bit of my light to replenish the site, because people take so much, they don't give anything back. That's one of the things that I do when I take people on tours. I said, let's leave something here. And then, if it's appropriate, let's ask for something in return and see what pops up, not the other way around. And I find it works really well. Sometimes the place needs to be cleansed, or a little bit of your energy has to go back into start the car battery, as I call it, in order to get the site activated, because it's been forgotten for so long. And when you do that, that's when the magic really occurs. And then after that, you say, "Well, what I need some help with this," and just let it go. And expect nothing in return. If you're expecting something, it's going to come from your own mind, because you want that validation. If you just let it go and say, and sometimes I don't know what I'm looking for, I just go, "Well, so what's this all about? How can I talk about this in a way that convinces people?" I just sit there, have a drink, have a sandwich, watch the fairies. And then, oh, that's interesting. And before you know it, you're just writing and scribbling things down. And I go, oh, that was really clever. Aren't I special? And then you go, that came from someone else. And it's true. And that's how books begin, with that sort of connection. And it gets you on that path of research and discovery, which then you have to set you have to park your bum for hundreds of hours in libraries and things like that. And the information will come to you. It's that interaction with the management that helps you do what you do in your work, no matter whether you're doing channeling, sacred space work, or any other kind of work, even car mechanics. If they're really tuned in to what they're doing, they will be able to figure things out in a way that's so irrational, and yet it works.
Sure. Perhaps we should spend a little more time really talking about why portals exist and how they work. We've kind of danced around it a little bit. You talked about telluric currents, the energy that now science has proven exists and flows in certain lines and not always straight lines. Are they the same as ley lines?
Everybody asks me that, and I always tell them I don't know who came up with this absurd idea that ley lines are energy lines, but it requires a lot of explaining and re-explaining. Yeah, people confuse the two. Ley lines are geometric alignments between three or more places that have similar functions, ages, and so forth, or histories. Not the same thing. Sometimes certain sites are connected by the same straight line alignments, but they're also connected by the same energy. So there can be an overlap, but they're not the same as energy lines. Telluric currents are the dragon lines, the serpent lines that literally behave like serpents that flow through the land. And they are measurable. NASA knows about them. In fact, they made a wonderful prophetic public relations exercise in 2008 when they said, whenever we're looking for telluric currents on the face of the earth, we follow the underground veins of water, because those veins of water attract the magnetic currents. And they're also connected to the sun. They go up to the sky and they connect to the sun. And these things open like portals. Imagine NASA using the word portals in the press release. They open like magnetic portals that link the earth to the sun. And that's what people in India were talking about over 12,000 years ago, about these serpents that glide along the ground that connect to the sky. Now, the other thing that happens is the fact that many of the concentrations of temples around the world and megaliths are placed exactly at the intersecting points of these telluric currents, and they also happen to coincide with the Earth's geomagnetic field and the variations in the gravity field of the Earth, which we are now beginning to understand. That's something to your state of awareness. It only takes a little bit of a change in the local gravitational field, either whether it's increased or decreased, to get you to cross between worlds. It has a direct influence on your state of consciousness. It's a line of thought that's still in its infancy, but we know it works. And one of the things that the way it does is that if you go around areas of the world where you see enormous rocks covered with petroglyphs, and I don't mean just of animals and people hunting animals, I'm talking about unusual symbols that are very graphic, like it's its own language. They happen to coincide with these hotspots called conductivity discontinuities. Now, thank God that the Sioux knew about this, because they call it scan. He likes this. People, this is live television.
That's right. Thank you, Rusty.
He likes the energy. So the Sioux call it scan, much easier to remember. And they said that whenever you interact with scan, you achieve a certain numinous quality, because the land is in harmony with the human body, and the two work to get you out of the body to go to the other world, retrieve information, and come back. So
this is where if I may interrupt, I told everybody at the beginning that there was a reason that I knew I had to reach out to you. I was reading your book last week while I was on my elliptical, just because I was looking forward to meeting you at the conference in Atlanta. And all of a sudden I read something that explained an event that I have written about in my own book, but didn't realize what was going on. I gasped so loud. My husband was across the room and he looked at me, and I was just so excited. I wrote about a time when my husband and I were hiking in Banff, British Columbia. Yeah. And we started up this mountain that had 33 switchbacks. as I started hiking, the ground beneath me seemed to start to wave and undulate. I thought, that's strange. The next thing you knew, I just climbed that mountain with no physical exertion,
Yeah.
no sense of tiredness. I got to the top, ready to do it all again. There was no explanation for me at that moment about what happened to my body, where did it go, how could I have possibly climbed all that height, all those switchbacks without breathing heavy or being tired. And I know now it had to have been a portal.
Yeah, and in fact, you've just mentioned something that a lot of mountaineers have talked about over the years. My second book, The Divine Blueprint, actually went into the origin of sacred sites, how they mirror natural elements like sacred mountains. I mean, why are some mountains sacred and the others are just average, normal mountains? It
Yeah.
turns out that the exact places where mountaineers suddenly feel this out of body connection, where they feel suddenly filled with this energy that came out of nowhere, even though they're exhausted. It happened to coincide with these geomagnetic hotspots. So they may not be able to understand what's going on or intellectualize it, but they can sense it. And they are drawn to these places, and it gives them a certain push. Like they even talk about be able to perceive the environment around them in a different way. Like they're
Right.
looking through water, or the air is somewhat sweeter and thinner. And it's far hard for them to put into words, but they are essentially describing why the mountain is sacred. There are these little hotspots that essentially it's the foundation of a portal that is the crossing point of 2 points of reality, which your body, being electromagnetic by nature, is responding to. So in your case, you're much more sensitive to it because you're aware that the process works. So if you're aware of it, you go, oh, hello, I'm sitting in a place where, oh, I'm getting the tingly winglies, and boom, off you go. But before you know it, you're at the summit.
Is there a difference between a geomagnetic hotspot and a portal?
The same thing. It's just a difference of language. For me, a portal essentially is the manipulation of the laws of nature in a given environment done by humans, and then anchored to the spot using large stones, which are specifically chosen for the task of doing earth acupuncture. If you've ever been to Egypt and you go to the inner core of the pyramids, you look at the stone and you go, that stone is not local. It came from 400 miles away. Now, who in their right minds, and we're talking now thousands of years ago when this was being done with ships and God knows what else. And they said, well, why would you drag this stone that far when you have stone that's right over there? There's a quarry a mile away. Make it easy for yourself. Well, because if you look at the quality of the stone, it has exactly the same things that you find in the human body. There's a lot of silica, there's a lot of magnetite, and a lot of iron, same stuff that flows through the blood or the veins of your body. So it's a mirror image of the human body, and also the properties are wonderful for storing piezoelectric energy. So you can actually send an intention to the stone, which we now know is a little packet of information, which has an electric signal. If you direct it to the quartz in the stone, just like me punching a key on this keyboard that will tell the computer what to do, you can tell the stone also to anchor the telluric current. And that's why these places are still alive, because the memory of the people that put the stones there and their instructions are in the stone. And the stone says, oh, my job is to make sure that this energy is not going to move. It's going to be here forever until someone destroys me or does otherwise. And that's why they still work today. So that, again, there's a real science behind all of this, and that's what creates a portal. It's just a punching of a hole between one level of reality into another. It's almost like a meeting point, or as I call them, the self-help centers of the planet. When we forget that we can't do it by practicing, esoteric tradition and going inwards instead of outwards, then we have the temple and the portal that says, you stand in here under the right circumstances, you can also go to the other world and come back in a certain amount of time and come back with lots of information.
How about sharing a story of one of your, well, I call them NOEs, no other explanation moments at a portal? I mean, I know you talk in your book, Portals, about being in the Great Pyramid and seeing beings of light that other people saw as well. That's, for a medium, that's awesome. But how about another one that most people would be quite surprised by?
Oh God, yeah, there's so many, aren't there? One of my earliest ones, and again, going back to my study of crop circles, which I should point out, they are designed exactly in the same way as any temple on the face of the earth, just using flattened crop. It was not a result of two guys who said they did the whole thing with string and planks of wood. They were actually paid by the Ministry of Defense in Britain to actually come out and say that, and they were outed as being complete frauds, because you don't get to hear that in the media, unfortunately. But anyway, the point was that when I was just getting into all of this and not really knowing where I was going at the time, kind of just treading like a child, messing up from one place to the next, but learning by, landing on my face, but then getting up on my feet and going, oh, I get it now. And one of the things I was looking for was the origin of what was behind the creation of crop circles. And I kept pushing the boundary and saying, there's got to be something tangible here, because it's an intellectual process. There's a lot of science behind it. There's a lot of mathematics behind it. It has to be someone or something that is conscious, because we're interacting with it all the time. We could predict when the crop circles were appearing. We knew where they're going to be, what the designs were. So obviously there was a conscious interaction. And one day I saw one of them and I went, this is exactly what I was looking for. And a friend of mine said, what are you looking for? I said, I'm looking for the origin, who's behind it and what makes the whole thing tick. And I can't explain what I just said, but I know that this design, I'm going to meditate here in the evening and see if I can connect. And I went there in the middle of the night. It was 11:30 at night, and pitch dark. You're in the middle of Britain and the least populated part of the island. And I'm inside the crop circle. Incredible thing. I mean, nothing's damaged. I mean, you're pressing the wheat and you can hear the sound of the air coming from underneath. And I just lie down there. And the next thing I know, there's this big bright light around me, and I'm thinking, I'm not really into abductions. Okay, yeah, they take place. I don't do abductions. I got a book to write. I'm trying to figure this puzzle out, and I said, just go away, and it went boom. I thought that was interesting, and then I almost heard like footsteps coming up behind me, and I thought, I hope it's not the farmer, because I actually forgot to get permission to be here. I didn't have the time to go and get permission. Although I know the guy who runs the farm, he wouldn't have a problem with it. And I thought, oh dear, I have to explain it, come out of my reverie. And then it's like someone took a baseball bat and hit me on the shoulder here.
Oh.
And it's like all my nerves just went like this. I suddenly felt, and I still remember it as clear as daylight, and this was over 25 years ago, I started watching my arms floating around me. I went, that's interesting. And I suddenly realized I'm floating above the soil. And so I'm out of body, literally. And I'm floating. I thought, this is a really great experience. And as clear as I'm seeing you right now, there are 3 people on either side of me and 2 at the front, dressed in these beautiful white garments, these silk garments. And they're the same people that I would come to see in the Great Pyramid again, that came out of the stones years later. And they were doing sign language. And I thought, oh, okay, I get it. So it's this strange communication that kind of like Balinese dancers do when they do the dances in Bali. It's like an expressive, symbolic language. And I said, I know exactly what you're saying. And then before I realized it, I had a click, which was the cassette tape that I had some music with me back in the days of cassette tape.
Yeah.
45 minutes had gone by, 45 minutes, and I hit the ground with such a thud. I had a little welt on the back of my neck afterwards, and I got and after that I couldn't stop writing like an idiot, and that became the foundation of my first book. And it all came from this incredible experience, but it taught me something very valuable, that A, there's no need to be afraid. 2, you can communicate with the management and whatever you want to call it at these places. And 3, they've got your back. We call them the guardian angels these days in religion. That's what essentially they are. And it gives you permission to accept that there's some interchange going on, which is beneficial. And that's where the whole process really began. So, yeah, that really sort of marked me as a moment where I'm going to quit everything that I knew. So I lost, within 2 weeks, I lost my wife, my house, my friends, my car, everything. And I'm feeling sorry for myself. But the fringe benefits were wonderful, because after that, wherever I went and I gathered a little bit more experience, I was getting also experiences back this way to validate the fact that don't worry about feeling bad for yourself. It will work out just fine. So we're going to present these experiences to you to keep following the trail so that you can feel confident that it will go somewhere. And here we are 20 odd years later.
Yeah. And you write in your book, Portals, about how somebody can go to a specific site and not get what they think they need, and then come back later and get what you need. It's interesting that one site you wrote about is called Devil's Den. And just yesterday, I was making a slide for a presentation, and it was of a place at Gettysburg Battlefield, but there was a sign that said Devil's Den. I remember saying, oh, I don't want to use that in the picture. People might get freaked out with the devil part. And there it came up in your book in a different country. But why don't you talk about your experience there?
Yeah, Devil's Den is interesting. It's one of the oldest sites in South Britain, and it used to be a big passage mound. All that's left is the dolmen that held up the entrance, but it's still very powerful. It's been used for so long, aligned to the summer solstice sunset and the sunrise. And I remember going there when I was still practicing all of this and still tripping over myself, learning the hard way, which is a good way of doing it. I mean, you can't make things up. You have to go through the process and learn to fall flat on your face once in a while. And I remember going up into the field, which has public access, and not many people know about this place. It's not easy to get to. And I remember hearing this big booming voice saying, "Thou shalt not go any further," or words to that effect. And I looked around. I thought, well, if it's a farmer, it's okay. I mean, there's public access. And I dogleg my leg over. And again, there was that booming voice as, "You don't need to come in here right now. Go back where you came from." And it kind of freaked me a little bit. So I walked back, went back to my car, and I got my car, and I thought, I'm going to have a little tea with Isabel, the channeler. So I went to see Isabel, the channeler, and sat down. She's making a cup of tea, and just suddenly has this moment of intense quiet. She goes, "Have you just come back from the Devil's Den?" That's how good she is. "Have you just come back from the Devil's Den?" I said, "Maybe." "Why?" I said, "Did you get the big voice telling you not to come in?" I said, "Yes." "What's that all about?" "Well, you're not ready yet. You're trying to run before you can walk." It's a place of very intense, raw energy. It's a very old sacred site. You kind of have to get a bit more experience, learn what it is that you're doing, gain some confidence, and come back a couple of years later and see what happens. I went, okay, I'm going to make a note of that, because she's never wrong. And so, I'd go around doing my work, gaining confidence, learning experience. And then one day when I'm having tea, I went, I haven't been back to the Devil's Den in 3 years. Maybe I should go back there and pick up that conversation. And I remember going there, and it was like someone rolling out the red carpet. I went, well, finally, welcome back. Because my frequencies, this is what happens with portals. You accumulate a little bit of the energy when you go to these places. You act like a piece of blotting paper. You soak it up. And the frequency in your body starts going from 88 FM to 90 FM. And it's gradual. You don't want to do it too quickly, because it's a bit like sticking your fingers in the electricity circuits on your wall. It's not going to work out well. You've got to raise your frequency a little bit, bit by bit, bit by bit. And then when you're right, and your frequency matches the resonance of the local sacred site, then the portal opens for you. Because otherwise, this big frequency with this little frequency is going to blow up all your circuits. It's a safeguard to tell you, if you don't feel well coming here, if you feel that the approach is making you feel a little bit sick, that's our way of telling you, then come here. Go to the other place down the road. That's the one for you. Once you're done there, come back over here. So that's also good advice, practical advice, to hear what the sacred site is telling you, because sometimes your ego wants to go in temple A, but your soul is saying, but I want to go into temple B. And you're going, okay, let's give the soul a chance to talk. We'll go to temple B, and there you'll feel much better. And then you go back to temple A and you go, oh, that works. So again, there's this unwritten, unspoken language, but if you're aware of the environment and if you're mindful, you can follow this and trust it implicitly.
So it sounds to me that you've not had knock your socks off experiences at everyone. I know you say in your book that sometimes nothing happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because your ego's trying to force something to happen, and it's like you're in the wrong place at the wrong time. And then you go back home and then you start scribbling. It very much is a resonance between two organisms. If there's a sympathetic resonance, it's just like sound theory. If you hit a tuning fork in a room only the other forks in the room that are tuned to that resonance will vibrate. The other ones will just be a piece of metal standing there doing nothing.
Right.
And it really does apply to sacred space as well. You've got to be of the frequency of the site. And the only way you'll know is just by being honest with yourself. You know, sit down with a cup of tea and say, what do I feel like going to be better than I am right now? And just sit there, look out of the window, look at the birds, and suddenly you have this inclination to go online and go, I should maybe look at some trips to the Yucatan for no reason whatsoever. And then you find yourself there and you go, oh, I feel so much better after I visit these sites. And oh, I've got some great new ideas. You see, that's how it happens.
Yes.
There's a sympathetic resonance, and there's a download. So every place was designed to instill a different teaching or a different purpose or a different healing. You just have to make your body aware and listen to what they're trying to tell you.
Have you mapped out the portals around the world, or are there too many to map out?
Oh God, too many. I had an email just this morning for someone who says, can you teach me where all the telluric currents are so I can find them on Google Earth? Well, one, they're invisible, so you can't see them on Google Earth. And just like arteries in your body, there's millions of them. They're everywhere. I'm sitting on one right now. It's the only place in my apartment where I can put my desk and do my work. Why? Because the spirit of place got me here. And it was the only place, A, I could afford in Portland, Maine, and that was available on the market. And I got it. And it's the only place where I can sit, and I'm being charged by the telluric current, and I'm feeding it as well because of what I do. It's a two-way system. And so many people that do this, and I bet you where you're sitting right now is the same thing. We are attracted to these places because we sense a sense of connectivity for the work that we're doing. And healers are particularly big with this. They'll say to me, well, can you come and look at my land and see if there's a portal or an energy source here? I said, well, you're sitting on it. This is why you do the healing where you are, because you're already picking up this source of energy.
That's interesting, because just before coming on air here, I had just a few more pages to finish your book. And we've lived in this house for 5 years. And for only the second time, I said to my husband, I'm going to go sit in that bench in the backyard there and read this. And I found myself sitting in the sunshine, getting attacked by gnats, but I was just so drawn to be there, and I know there must be a point to that. So interesting.
It really is. And and usually with my clients, and I still do this as a side job, I go and clean energy off lands, and especially around the main coast, it's mostly ledge, so the water gets trapped between the ledge. So any atrocity that's occurred in the last 500 years is trapped there. The memory is trapped in the water. I could do a whole living until the end of my life, just going around fixing the problems in people's houses. But I often find that people that are doing either healing or they're much more sensitive to their environment, they are exactly where they need to be. And I said, you don't need to pay me to find out. You know where you are, because it used to be an old sacred site by the local tribes. And it turns out, after a bit of research, their house was built on an old Abenaki sacred site, just like my house was as well. It was a big meeting place where they used to be in the summer, in the middle of what is now downtown Portland, Maine. And a lot of people are attracted to that building because of what is there, but they don't know it, but they can sense it. So same thing. You go to a certain part of the building or the land where you know that your work requires a little extra push over the cliff, and that's where you do it. So you've got your own portal running for your own building.
No doubt. You say in the book you give a clue to becoming more sensitive by noticing 10 things that are in awareness sound-wise around you. And I started doing that the last couple of days, and it's hard to find 10 sounds at one time. I could pick up 4, and that really was all that was there. And I realized I'm already sensitive to that because that's part of my work as a medium.
Exactly.
But what are other ways for normal people to tune into the energy of a place? There's
one very curious one, which is these are the most sensitive parts of your body. This is where the electrical currents happen to be most sensitive in the whole human body. So the act of prayer, you're connecting left and right, masculine, feminine. It's very powerful stuff. A bit like the electrical circuit in the board, and you stick the finger in the electrical circuit. If you rub your hands when you go anywhere near the sacred space and get your electrodes going, and you just happen to sense, and usually closing your eyes is very useful because then you're not confused by what's around you. And you get this sort of pressure like you're touching saran wrap, or if you happen to be tuning in from England, cling film. I got to think of these cultural faux pas. It's like saran wrap. You get this what I call the tingly winglies on the touch of your fingers, and that's when you know you reach the what I call the kind of the energy field that protects the site, and it's usually near the entrance or where there's two large stones or a certain part of the design which stands out from the rest. That's where the current usually comes through. And during the day, it's like a big energy field, and you can sense it. That's one of them. The other one again is being aware of your environment, where suddenly the air smells different. It's a bit sweeter, and the sound is subtly different as well. But again, it goes back to, again, being mindful of your landscape, which is why I like telling people, how many sounds can you name from the last 15 minutes? And believe me, the more you do it, it becomes so quick. You can name 10, 15, 20 sounds. You can even hear the sound of the grass growing under the right conditions. That's how sensitive you become. And after that, it becomes a sense of smell becomes much more defined. Your sense of vision becomes much more defined. And that's what it means to be psychic. You're just sensitive to your environment. So those are just some of the techniques you can use. Don't drink alcohol when you go to sacred sites because it impairs the ability. And a lot of the illusions that you're getting are kind of drowned out by the alcohol. Not the alcohol is bad in itself. It's just not helping the process. Fasting helps the process because your body starts to clamor for something to try and catch onto because you're losing energy. So it's looking for energy to replenish itself because it's not being replenished by food. I know people who do a lot of meditation before they go to put them in a state of awareness. That also works. And sometimes just going there without any expectation, walking around the perimeter of a site and mindfully opening the site as though it was a being that was roused from slumber. And you'd be amazed what happens when you're going through the entrance. Suddenly it feels like you're in a completely different spatial environment. Again, the smell, the light is different. The sounds are different. You pick up simple things that you weren't aware of before. And that's when you know you're in a very subtle environment. And sometimes people just go in and meditate and go inside because technically you don't need these places. You really are the temple. Jesus said it pretty well. The temple of God is in here. Absolutely right. So when we forget that we can't do it internally, then you have external places to remind you of the abilities that you were born with. We're all psychic, really. We just forget.
Is it still fun for you to go to these places? You lead trips that are sold out.
Oh, God, yeah. I just came back from Yucatan, and I hadn't been there in a few years since COVID. And I have to say the trips during COVID, even to Egypt, were the most fun because there's nobody around. We had hurdles we had to get through, and we knew this. But my God, I remember being in front of the Great Pyramid without a single tourist, and I could hear the pyramid breathing a sigh of relief. It looked at me and it went, oh, finally, peace and quiet. The building is exhausted from the frivolous attention it gets from millions of people. And being there and being in that sense of quiet, listening to the temple breathing and talking back to you was a privilege. So I still, for me, the wonder never ceases. And again, like I said before, I've moved to different places. Sometimes it's Scotland, sometimes it's Portugal's now very high on my radar. I lead 2 groups a year. I think the last group sold out in 50 seconds. I mean, it's ridiculous. The word is out. We have fun. But again, it's I go where I feel attracted to. I'm going to be in Brittany in April to do a documentary and pick up some more information from that part of the world. Because I go where my body feels it's reacting to, what it needs to go and pick up information so I can get on with my work. But I don't know what my work is. That's the fun part. I really don't know what I'm doing. I just go where my body says, let's go here and find out what this is about. And you come back with a bunch of notes later on. It's always magic. So for me, there's no end of excitement. And if I can't go abroad, I'll go to New Mexico. There's a beautiful throat of an old volcano called Shiprock, or if you're daring in Navajo, Sebitai. And it's like the big rock with wings. Looks like a petrified angel. I've seen grown men break down in tears at the foot of that volcanic throat. And it's one of the most powerful places on the planet. Yeah, it's a geomagnetic hotspot. It's a gravitational anomaly and so forth. The same undercurrent of sacred space is the foundation of that natural landscape temple. And I can tell you, you don't want to climb that thing. A, it's illegal, and two, you should only do it as an initiate of the Navajo tribe. And you don't need to. Just stand there and listen to what raw power sounds like, and you are humbled. It gets me every single time, that place.
I'm going to look it up because I know that our travels around the country this year are taking us to New Mexico. So
you have to go. You have to go.
What's the name again?
Shiprock is the local name. It's right by the Four Corners. You can't miss it. It's from 50 miles in any direction.
No, I'm sure I've seen it on other travel.
Oh, it's the most incredible place
But
in
this
North
is
America.
the thing, Freddie, that I didn't know about all of this, and I wouldn't have believed it in the past. But I remember going as the aide to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs to the Great Pyramids, and because we were with the head of the U.S. Armed Forces, there was nobody around. We had a private tour. We went up in the King's Chambers, but I wasn't in a place to appreciate it. I felt nothing special. I was one of those tourists that were just oblivious. And
not the right time.
Yeah, hopefully I'll get to go back and truly.
Everything has the right time, I find. Again, it's about the connection between one person and the next. Just because you didn't experience anything doesn't mean that it was nothing was happening. Something would have triggered something inside you, which led you to where you are today, undoubtedly. But you had to go and actually fulfill the journey by going to other places which are more akin to your level of frequency. It happens. It's different for everybody. Some people, I always warn them about going to Peru and Bolivia because these sites are raw energy. It's not for everybody. These are for your fire signs, your Aries and people like that. They love that stuff. And it does something for them. But if you go there as a girly man like I am, I like feminine temples. Doesn't mean that I'm gay. It just means that I like feminine temples and feminine energy. I'm comfortable with that. And for me to go to Peru required most of my life. It was till I was 50 till I got there. And I went, now I get it. I wasn't ready to experience that. I can understand. And going to Tiwanaku, one of the oldest places on the planet, it's raw. I mean, it hits you, and by the end of the evening, you go to bed early and you have a 12-hour sleep. It literally drains you of energy. But you go, I get it now. I wouldn't have been able to handle that 5-10 years ago. So it's all whatever's appropriate. That's how it works.
Well, I hope that this discussion has really ignited a curiosity in people for whom this is probably pretty new information. I know that I just devoured your book Portals, and I want to dive into some of your other ones. Now, you also teach courses. You have online courses, right?
I do, and it was part of the book series. And again, I didn't really feel the need to write another book, and the publisher approached me, as she approached you as well, and said, "Well, you could probably write this in your sleep." I said, "Well, I don't have anything really new to say. I don't want to capitalize on anything. I'm not doing this for commercial reasons. I'm doing it because I love what I do. If the commerce comes in, that's fantastic." And she says, "Well, you can write about this." And I said, "Yeah, I could probably write that on the plane." And I actually wrote half the book sitting in 5 hours on a plane with my little cabin,
But what's good about this one, just like my book, Mediumship, with this Common Sentience series, part 2 are 30 stories submitted by other people who have had their own experiences. So this opens up all of us to see it's not just you because you're attuned to this. This is possible for anybody.
Exactly. That's why I like taking the project on. I thought that was an original idea because they didn't know what I was going to write about, and I didn't read their stories, and we end up validating each other.
Yes.
And then from that develops the online course as well, to flush that out a little bit further with a lot more images. And then it becomes kind of a practical exercise. So in the end, it turns out to be a really good thing. So I'm glad I didn't just say, I don't want to write another book, and then go, well, let's see what happens. And then boom, before you know it, all this magic again happens. So I'm sure it's the same for you as well.
It is. And just flowing like you're doing. I highly recommend your crop circle book. It was the best I have found on any, and really answered a lot of questions and shows what's real and what isn't real. So if anybody's interested in that phenomenon, check that out. And your website, what is that?
Invisibletemple.com.
Why is it called that?
Because it's about the invisible temple. The physical temple is just to get your attention. It's what's inside the temple that counts. It's inside the portal that really counts. The real treasure, because they talk about these places holding a treasure, which is why they were destroyed during the Victorian era. Guys going off with shovels to impress their girlfriends saying, we're going to dig up this treasure. Well, the treasure is the temple. And it's not the stones, it's what's inside the actual temple. It's the book, the invisible book of information, the astral reference library, Akashic record, whatever you want to call it. That's what's important. It's not what you see, it's what you don't see. And that's the paradox of this life, isn't it? We get so enamored by visual things, big pyramids. Well, who knew that the small pyramid on Giza Plateau is the most important one? Nobody goes there. They want the big one because it looks fantastic on Facebook. But the little one, that's where the good things go. And it's the same way you go around the world. People go to the big place, and I go, no, let's go to the little place here because that's where the fun really is. The rest is just attention. The little stuff, the stuff that requires a bit more effort, a bit more engagement, that's where you get the most important things. It's a bit like sushi. The smaller the portion, the more tasty it is. And the same thing holds in esoteric tradition. When you're not dealing with ego and appearances, it's the small details that are important. So hence Invisible Temple.
And such a beautiful analogy for who we are.
Exactly. Yeah, this is just the outer shell, the outer casing. It's all performance, but it's the inside that's important. The soul that's housed within this vessel, that's the most important thing. And we tend to forget that. And these places are the places that help you remember who you are and why you came here. And I can't tell you how many people I've seen, on day one of my tours, coming in with all the troubles of the world on their shoulder. And you can see it. They're kind of just hunched over. 10 days later, they're different people. Something's touched them. It's not because of what I've said or what I've done. I'm just a guidepost. It's their interaction with the space that's important. And I watch people change, even guys, crying in the middle of Edfu Temple after they've been bitching to me for days. I haven't experienced anything incredible. I've paid thousands of dollars. I said, wait till you get to this particular temple. Why? Trust me on this process. I can't explain it to you. Well, I could, but I just let them go in there, take them to a certain part of the building and leave them to their own devices. They discover themselves, and after that, you can't keep them out of the temple. It's like, it's 5 a.m. When do we leave? It's like, you got to be kidding me. I'm still asleep. So that's how it happens. It's about discovering yourself and why you came here, which is the reason why they built this temple complex around the planet. It was to help you discover yourself when you've forgotten who you are and why you came here. Very sensible.
That is such a great point, because right now I can feel a lot of viewers wanting to buy a ticket and go to some site that's going to instantly transform them. And just the name of your website shows us you already have what's at these sites.
Exactly.
And so, yeah, what a gift it will be when we get to visit those sites, as we get to visit them. But develop your sensitivity now, and that's when the magic happens.
Exactly. Dante was right. It's a divine comedy. It really is. He was absolutely right. He was an initiate of the mystery, so he knew that Shakespeare, or the person that the element called Shakespeare, of which was made up of many people, by the way. Shakespeare was just a front. They contribute to all of this, to the understanding that the whole world is a stage. We're just the players. What a great line, and it's absolutely true. We're here having an experience of the soul in a body in the physical world, trying to understand itself and trying to improve itself. That is the essence of the mystery of life. There's nothing else to do in the universe except to have an experience and keep building up the experience until to a point where you don't need more experiences. And then you're sitting on, some big throne upstairs going, well, now it's my turn to help other souls through their experience. And then I'm going to merge back with the creator, and poof, gone. And that's the way it works throughout the whole universe. But here's the paradox again. You kind of know it all when you're not in the physical body, because you're in the other world and you're connected to filaments which connect to everything in the universe. It's a very complicated concept. But when you come down here, you forget who you are and where you've been. And you have to start again like a child, learning from scratch. But if you're lucky, if you get the right tools and get to the right places and the right teachers and you're aware, then you remember part of that process and you remember why you're here. And that's what people in India always said. To dream the dream awake is the best thing you could have. The Greeks talked about this as well. Plato and Pythagoras, they were very big on this, that you have to dream the dream awake. To be aware of your purpose in life is the greatest skill that you can have. And there are places where you can remind yourself of why you're here and who you are. If you can do that, you're doing really, really well. And then you're conscious of everything around you. You have a degree of conscious manipulation of your ability to achieve daily goals, what we call manifestation. And that falls under your experience and your effects. No one else can tell you what to do. You've got complete control of fear, which is a huge hurdle for a lot of people. When you're in control of your own manifestation process, you're in charge. No one can tell you what's going to be right or wrong. You know the difference between the two, and that's what makes the experience very valid. And I can't find anything much more positive or important to say than that. It's been said by so many different people using different verbs and adjectives.
But what you just said just reminded me of when I had a talk with the publisher, when she asked me, Ariel Patricia is the publisher of Sacred Stories and this Common Sentience series that my mediumship book and your portals book are part of. She said her purpose was to show people that all paths lead to the same place. The wisdom that you just shared there is what I share in my Awaken Way teaching. You use portals and crop circles to get there. I use mediumship to get there. And this Expand conference in Atlanta has 6 of the authors. They each have their different methods. So it's, what are you drawn to? Let's dip into all of them and then just focus on wherever we go. So Freddy, this was a beautiful introduction to those in our community who are new to this. And I thank you for writing the book and for saying yes on short notice to doing this interview. It's just wonderful work.
Oh, thank you for dragging me away from for the next project. Otherwise, you can't see the wood for the trees. No, it's a pleasure, and I hope to see people in Atlanta as well. And I mean, that's a very good point. We'll be discussing things from different angles, and you realize at the end of the day, it's like they're just using different adjectives and verbs and nouns to describe the same process. Yeah, but one of them will click with you. Sometimes they can be a bit obtuse or very obvious. They're just tools, and you take the tool that's appropriate to you, mix it up a little bit, bring your own tools into it from your experience, and that's it. You're in charge now. No one else can tell you the path of where you're going to go or not.
And it's all bringing us back to the same place. I love it.
Absolutely.
So, for info on that conference, go to my website, SuzanneGiesemann.com. Just scroll down past the banner, and there's a featured event right there. You can click on that and get all the details. So, Freddy, I can't wait to meet you in person and attend your workshop. It's going to be great. Thank you so much.
Drinks are on me, unless Patricia's buying, in which case we're going to have a great party.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thanks, Suzanne.